All right, so this is my review for the movie Pieces. So, Pieces is a horror film that came out or was originally released in 1982, though apparently didn't come to America until 1983. When I tried to look up anything from the newspaper archives, it was nearly impossible. The name to the movie made it hard to search up anything about it. It appears that ads from the movie would say, "You don't have to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre." And ironically, that tagline helped me look up any advertisements for the movie. So pretty much, if the movie was advertised any other way, I don't know because the newspaper archives is a toss up. But I could tell you this much that when this movie originally came out in 1983 in America, advertisements, of course, would bring up the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was 8 years prior to this film. So it's really funny to see how giants in the movie industry, such as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, were these names that movies like Pieces would try to get some sort of fame or advertising or money from, using that name. So, anyway, despite all of the ads showing the movie, I was only able to find one review for it, which dated back to 1983, and of course, it wasn't a positive one. In the review, the writer stated that Pieces is feces, or Pieces is feces. So, strangely enough, I don't really have much to say about the movie. I found the plot to be pretty bad, but of course, typical of slasher movies. In the first 10 minutes, the first kill happens where you have the 10-year-old boy named Timmy, and he kills his mother because she freaked out on him because she found him in his room putting the pieces of a puzzle together of a naked woman. So Timmy's mother was obviously like crazy. Nowadays, we would say she had mental health issues for sure, but she seemed to also hate his father, which is a plot thread that's never talked about. And the father was over in Europe because it was 1942, and I guess she couldn't seem to deal with the fact that she was alone while he was at war. I'm just inferencing from that because, of course, the mom, the dad at war are all points that are never brought up after this intro. But Tibby killed his mom, basically. And so 40 years later, in 1982, various women at what's supposed to be Boston University are being murdered by a chainsaw murderer. Hence, of course, the whole Texas chainsaw, whatever, probably trying to get some of that fame. Maybe that's why they made the movie, to be like, oh yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was popular. Maybe we can make our own. I don't know. So there is a chainsaw murderer on the loose, and the film runs for 1 hour and 30 minutes. And so the idea is that there's two detectives trying to go around the campus of Boston University trying to find who the killer is. And in my opinion, they did a pretty bad job about it. I found much of the plot to be boring, and I actually welcomed the death scenes, like, oh yeah, this person's about to die, good, because they were the actually entertaining parts of the film. I feel like Pieces couldn't figure out, or it couldn't seem to figure out if it wanted to be a cop movie or a horror movie or a purposely cheesy sex film. The production was, or the movie was a co production between Spain, Italy, and the United States. At least that's what Wikipedia says. And it appears to have been filmed in English. I couldn't seem to find if it was only recorded in English. The audio to the movie seemed quite off to me, and it seemed that many of the characters' dialogues was dubbed post edit. So I don't know if there was another version of this, maybe recorded in Spanish. I don't know the reasoning behind the audio choices in the dialogue, but because I really couldn't, in general, find much information behind the film, especially about the languages. So that was another part I found weird because there's obviously people who were native English speakers and their dialogue seemed to add up. But then there were other characters who I could tell by the way they're mouthing, they're speaking English, but the post production makes it look like it was somebody else's voice. I don't know what was up with that. Anyway, according to Wikipedia, the film was mostly filmed in Spain, though any parts that were supposed to be in America were just shots from another film by the director, which was like 2, 3 years prior. Or maybe 10 years prior. But anyway, the film was supposed to be at Boston University, but ironically, majority of the shots of the college were the part of some place in Spain. Anyway, there were some funny parts to the film, such as when the dean announced that one of the other professors was a homosexual. The delivery to the line was so blunt, it threw me off guard, which is what I found funny. I don't remember the line verbatim, but the dean to the university was talking to this undercover cop who he probably didn't know was undercover at the time. But anyway, he was like, Professor Brown is a homosexual. I was like, okay. Maybe just modern day. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? I found it hilarious. Anyway, another funny moment to me was when the female detective had just kept screaming, bastards! Or she was more like, bastards! And she screamed it over and over, peaking the audio to the mic. And it was so funny because of how bad it was. But it was strange to me in a way that there would be these very low budget moments, the audio peaking, not being great, being terribly synced, when ironically much of the film doesn't look low budget. The movie definitely put more money on the gore scenes for sure, and the cinematography, more than anything else. The shots of the campus and various settings that were the Spanish settings that they actually filmed in, they looked really beautiful. They're very nice. And they showed these really nice shots of, wherever they were in Spain. I think part of the film was filmed in Madrid. But while watching the film, I definitely saw how this movie very likely inspired various video games, at least games that I'm familiar with. I'm not sure if it did exactly, but I could definitely see the similarities between this movie and some of the games from Puppet Combo, if you're familiar with that developer. This movie even reminded me of this game I used to play when I was a teenager called Clock Tower. There's a scene in the movie where one of the girls is chopped up in the bathroom, like disemboweled, everything. Very gory, which was crazy. The scene itself reminded me of a similar death scene in the game Clock Tower, the one for the PlayStation, where the character Helen, but I think Jennifer can come across this too. But typically I played as Helen. My sister and I, we play as Helen. Anyway, but Helen would go into the bathroom in the video game and find this character named Rose, who was literally disemboweled in the bathroom stall. So my point is just that I really could see how this movie influenced horror video games, 10 plus years later. So the movie ends really stupidly. It's not a satisfying ending for sure. It ends with the dean turning out to be Timmy, the murderer. And it's not exactly explained, though, how he was able to get away with his mom's murder at the beginning of the film. But then, of course, the plot in the movie was never that great anyway. So I didn't expect very much from it. In the movie, the detectives shoot Timmy, the dean, in the head, and one of the college students that was working with them bumps into a bookshelf, and then the shelf turns around and reveals a corpse pieced together with the parts of apparently the women killed. Now, when you read up descriptions of the movie, online nowadays, this is brought up like it's much more prevalent in the movie. Oh, the killer is taking pieces of the girls they kill and making some sort of body out of it. Well, that's not actually really talked about, and we don't see this until the end of the film. which is stupid to me. So there's this corpse that is pieced together with the random remnants of the women killed, and the movie ends with with this corpse grabbing the college student's crotch. They grab his nutsack and crush it to pieces. Blood everywhere. So overall, though, I found the film to be silly, kind of funny, but honestly boring, to tell you the truth. As said before, the death scenes were the most entertaining parts to the film, but the story itself really dragged on. I couldn't see myself watching this ever again. Really. And it's not because I was offended or anything. It just wasn't as good as I hoped. So on a slime scale, I give Pieces 2 slime.